Thank you very much for joining us tonight from the Dearborn Library. First off, I'd like to mention a few things. Got a summer reading program going. We encourage you to join us. We have gift cards and other prizes that you can win just by keeping track of your reading. Read as much as you want or read as little as you want. We want you to read. And we'll have a couple upcoming, want to alert you to a couple upcoming summer reading programs. We'll be talking with Mr. David Van Jael about his new book, The Book of Charlie, Wisdom from the Remarkable American Life of a 109-year-old Man on Thursday, July 6th at 6:30. And then we'll also be talking with Mr. Jonathan Eig about the new Martin Luther King biography. That's a great book on Tuesday, July 11th at 6:30. So I want to welcome Mr. Will Schwalbe to the program. He's a New York Times bestselling author of books like The End of Your Life Book Club. Really enjoyed his new book, We Should Not Be Friends. So thank you very much and welcome, Will.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted.
No, one of the themes for summer reading is all together now. And I would think friendship is real part of it. And I was happened to read statistics that men are having a hard time keeping friendships. Their 2021 survey from the Survey Center for American Life saying men, only 1 in 5 male friendships, I should say, sorry, 1 in 5 men received emotional support through a friendship. 21, and then another survey says fewer that 15% of male respondents say they had no close friends at all. So I was kind enough to, I approached Will and I said, hey, let's, this very appropriate book to talk about. And I just was, Will was kind enough to join us tonight. So I really appreciate that. So I guess first off, did you picture yourself becoming a writer when you're young?
I did. I was first very involved as a kid in theater, and I loved acting, and even went off to a summer stock theater to be an apprentice and learn the craft of acting. And I got there, I was maybe 15 years old, and I saw that I was surrounded by other kids and young adults. It was a semi-professional company who were trying to be actors. They were way more talented than I was. And I thought to myself, most of these people aren't going to make it as actors. It's the toughest business in the world. And also they're going to have to sit around and wait for someone to give them the opportunity to do their job. You can't just sit in your room and act, but you can sit in your room and write. And no one needs to give a writer the opportunity to write. A writer can just write. And I've always loved books. And I've always been a little bit of an introvert, loving to stay inside and read. And so I naturally found my way into writing. As soon as I did it, I loved it. And it quickly became something that I felt I needed to do.
Now, as a book lover, I should say, you often talk about, use the word tribes, and as a book lover, what books do you currently recommend?
So I'm always reading. I just finished a book that actually came out today. I had the lucky opportunity to get it a little bit early, and it's called Little Monsters by Adrienne Brodeur, Brodeur. And it is a novel that is set on the East Coast in a summer community, Cape Cod. And it's a marvelous story about a family and the family dysfunction and something that went terribly wrong years before. But it's a smart literary novel that is a page turner, and it's one I recommend really highly. So I finished that, and I always have to have a book going. So my new book, which I'm going to start tonight, is called Now Is Not the Time to Panic by Kevin Wilson. And I've heard great things about it. So that's my next one.
Well, that's an interesting title.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. That'll catch your attention. But
so those are two recently, and then right before the Adrian Brodeur, I had read a Graham Greene book that I had never read called The End of the Affair, which is a book I'd always heard marvelous things about, and it's a very fascinating, dark story of an affair between a man and a woman, and it involves a detective, or personal investigator, and it's a tiny book, but just marvelous. So that's another one.
Yeah, I always remember the movie, or the movie version with Ralph Fiennes and Julianne Moore, I want to say.
I've never seen the movie, and so now I want to go watch it.
Yeah, definitely. Now let's talk about friendships. Now, do you have a different communication style depending on the person? Now, for myself, when I talk to my dad or like my brother, it tends to be just the facts. And then when I talk to, especially my friends who are women, I tend to more share my emotions or how I'm feeling, as opposed to just purely the facts. I mean, like when I talk to my dad and my brother, my wife is always, "Did you ask this? Did you ask that?" And that's not necessarily a problem with my friends who are women. Do you find yourself doing the same thing?
I definitely do. And I'm so glad that you opened our conversation the way you did with the idea of focusing on men's friendship. This book, as you know, is about my 40-year friendship with a guy totally different from me. We met at a secret society, and he became a Navy SEAL, and I became a writer and editor. But even though we were totally different in so many ways, we shared what is a very stereotypically male style of friendship. And this is something that I learned to think about through the lens of a writer named Deborah Tannen. And she's a linguist who wrote a very influential book called You Just Don't Understand. And it was about the differences between the way men and women communicate. And her lens just, to me, was spot on. And what she wrote about is, she said that the way that women are typically raised in America, this isn't about gender essentialism, this is about the way we're raised, but the way that women are often raised in America is to define their friends as the people they tell things to, the people they share secrets with in conversations. Okay. And that men, when they're boys, are often taught to define their friendship is the people they do things with. So typically in our society, a boy will be taught that your friends are the people you ride a bicycle with, or go skateboarding with, or play basketball with. And as a result, boys are taught in our society to spend time doing things, and it's very hard to talk when you're doing things. When you're actually shooting hoops, or riding your skateboards, or riding your bicycles, or playing video games, you're engaged in the activity of the thing. And this stays with us as we grow. So women increasingly who are brought up in this way will have deep and meaningful conversations with their friends, which are easier to maintain across a busy life. And men who, after high school or college, may lose the ability to spend time with their friends in person, will then not have the emotional and social skills to transition to a style of friendship that is much more about sharing feelings, thoughts, than doing activities. And you started with those really stark statistics. And I do feel like this is why, or at least part of the reason why, there is this epidemic of loneliness among men. That as men age, they don't have as many friendships. And as our Surgeon General has just pointed out, this isn't just an emotional crisis, this is a health crisis, a mental and physical health crisis, this crisis of loneliness. So I wanted to write about my friendship for many reasons, but one of the things is I wanted to celebrate male friendship, get us talking about male friendship, and also show the journey that my friend Maxie and I went on, where we reached the point where both of us were able to sit around and talk.
Oh, yeah, that sort of answers my next question. Now you came up with the idea for the book. Yeah, I find I myself am a sensitive person, so maybe I could tell or be a little more prone to friendships or what to say, but not everybody is like that. So it's, yeah.
No, and actually the idea didn't, that's how I grew into writing it. But actually the idea for writing the book was very different. I had this friend Maxie who, as I said, went in the Navy SEALs and founded an extraordinary school on the island of Eleuthera in the Bahamas, a school for young people to spend a term abroad and learn about conservation and the ocean, and also gain a kind of resilience and be separated from their electronics and learn to meet other kinds of kids. And I went to my longtime publisher and I said to them, I want to write a biography of my friend Chris Maxey. And I told them all about Maxey and I described him and his life story. And at the end of the conversation, my publisher, who's an extraordinary man named Sunny Mehta, incredibly wise, just paused for a long time. And then he said, I think the book you want to write is about your friendship. And I said to him, yes, that is the book I want to write. And that's how I found my way into this book. It started as a biography of a person, and it turned into a biography of a friendship.
Wow. Wow. Now, I guess let's go to the beginning. You both, Chris, Maxie, and yourself, both attended Yale at the same time.
Yep.
And how did you get picked to be in the secret society? At least you did, and also Chris did.
Yeah, it's very funny. I have to tell you, as you know from reading the book, I call him Maxie. And whenever anyone says Chris, I have to think for a second, Chris who? And then I remember.
Oh, yeah.
His wife always says to me, have you talked to Chris recently? And I always say, Chris who? And
yeah.
Maxie. So we were both at Yale. It was the early 80s, and I had just come back from taking a term away from school to work in Los Angeles. And we were both invited to join a remarkable secret society at Yale, which only for seniors, 15 kids. And the idea was the 15 most different kids at Yale. And the way we were selected is every year, the previous group of 15 most different kids chooses the next group, and they have to be unanimous on every person. And if you're chosen and accept and decide to join this thing, the 15 of you go to a magnificent granite hall that's off campus, and you have to have dinner twice a week together and can never miss. And you engage in something we call the audit, which is you tell your life story to each other, and you have speakers and you go on retreats. And it is totally free. It's paid for by an endowment and the alumni. And it really was the 15 most different kids they could possibly find. And one important thing I should add is the day Yale accepted women, this secret society accepted women. So we were half young men and half young women, and everything from one of the best known ballet and modern dancers at the college to star football player, Maxie, this legendary athlete, me, AIDS activist, bookish classics person. We were totally different. And it was an extraordinary social experiment that really worked.
Yeah, I've always found when you share quite a remarkable experience with people, you tend to be really open to each other. I mean, I remember seeing a Bergman film at school, and with a bunch of people in my class, and we got out of it, and we were all like ready to pour out our lives to each other. uh, Now, you mentioned about doing audits. Uh, you all of you did it like once a week, right?
You only did the audit once. So there was in the fall term, and it was just fall and spring because it was just your senior year. Each kid in turn would give their audit. And so with 15 kids, it was 15 sessions of our getting together. It was after dinner. And people really prepared for it. They would spend anywhere from 3 to 7 hours telling the other kids pretty much every single thing they could remember from their life. And the deal was not a word of anyone's story was ever to be breathed outside of the hall. And we respected that. I never heard of a case of someone telling one of the secrets we heard in the hall. And even writing this book, in which case I share some hints of some of the stories, I went back to my friends from that year and ran it by them and asked them if it was okay to share what I shared. So to this day, no one's ever, without permission, shared a word from an audit.
I guess what I'm after is how did you feel after listening to everybody's audits? Like, did you feel closer to them?
Way closer because of the level of honesty. And this is a big topic in the book. Because I was this very outlandishly dressed out gay kid, there was, for Maxie, I don't think he'd ever met an out gay person before. In fact, I know he hadn't. So it's fair to say that he was a little bit prejudiced against me. But I found out that I was way more prejudiced against him. I found out that I made all sorts of assumptions based on that he was a jock, that he dressed in a certain way, that he hung out with a bunch of people. And when he told me his audit, and I learned his thoughts and feelings, the facts of his childhood, a traumatic event that involved almost losing his brother. When I heard 4 hours of Maxie telling me everything he could remember from his life, I realized I had terribly misjudged this person, and that I was instantly closer to him and him to me and all of us, because we really make a lot of assumptions about each other. And that experience of sitting down and listening to someone, really listening, there's no substitute for it.
Yeah, I just was how that can change. I mean, technology is great, but there's nothing better than the human touch, actually communicating and seeing like the differences in another person, and maybe saying, "Hey, I didn't know that. Maybe I can be friends with somebody who I think is different."
Yeah, and one of the things that was really important, and I write about in the book, is they had an alumni come in and really teach us how to receive other people's stories. They gave us rules. And they told us, for example, when someone's telling you their story, you let them tell you their whole story. You don't interrupt them, you let them finish. If you have a question to ask, it has to be genuine curiosity. It can't be your own story disguised as a question, and it can't be a why question, they told us, because when you ask why questions, why did you do that? Or why did you go there? Or why did you say that? There's almost an implicit criticism. So it sounds like, why did you do that? I wouldn't have. So they gave us these rules, and they also said, when you ask a question, the person can answer for any reason or no reason. And it is a valuable skill I tried to maintain to this day. But there was one other really important aspect of it, which is we all knew we were going to share our stories with each other. So we treated each other's stories the way we wanted them to treat ours.
Cool. Yeah, that's respect.
Respect.
People want to be heard. That's one thing that one of the things that have taught me by doing these Zoom talks. People want to be heard. People want to be seen.
Yep.
And respect will get you very far.
Yeah. Yeah.
So before we get too far in that, I mean, between you and Maxie, you had plenty of conversations, but memories tend to get lost over time. How did you recreate a lot of the conversations that you write about in the book?
Well, one of the things that little thing that shocked me is I learned over the course of writing it and spending time with Maxie that he had kept a detailed journal of our senior year. And that's, again, I never would have thought Maxie was the kind of person to keep a journal. So he had actually written down verbatim some of our conversations.
Wow.
Some of the conversations are from a contemporaneous journal Maxie kept. I'm also a constant scribbler, so I write down a lot of things and scribble notes of conversations. But in fact, most of the conversations we had to recreate and in our minds. So I would sit around with Maxie, luckily enough, sometimes on the island of Eleuthera, and I would say, now, I think when you told me this, I said this. Is that what you recall? And he would say, yeah, I think you said that, but actually I kind of remember you said this also. So I'm like, okay, I got it. And then what did you think you said? And then he'd say, and I'd say, yeah, that sounds right, but I also remember. So we literally jointly recreated our conversations.
Cool.
And when we couldn't remember, there's a great phrase from Thucydides in the Peloponnesian Wars. He said, these are what people said or what they ought to have said. And so when we really couldn't remember, we said, well, what do you think you would have said?
Well, yeah, you can't be perfect.
You can't be perfect. But I will say that I do something in my memoir that not all memoirists do, but it's very important to me, which is I fact check everything that can be fact checked. And I also show the various chapters to everyone else who was there. So if I said that there were 4 of us sitting around and Maxie said this and I said that, and I know who the other people were at the table at the time, before I get to final draft, I will send them that scene and say, is this how you recollect it?
Okay.
So in as much as I can, but memoir, I also always remind myself that as I see memoir, it's what you remember. So if that's genuinely what you remembered, then it's as correct as you're going to get it if it can't be fact checked.
Yeah. There's a point where you have to say, yeah, that's it.
That's what I remember.
Yeah. Now, again, you maybe kind of answered this question, but throughout the book, you have trouble letting your guard down to get to know someone or try to reach out to someone like Maxie. Now that you're more comfortable with doing that, what do you find are the benefits to not just the friendship between you guys, but also in your life as a whole?
It's a really great question, and I have to answer it in 2 parts. One, the first part goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is that going back to a stereotypically male style of communication. And so part of it is, I think, the way that guys are trained to talk with each other is not to let their guards down emotionally. But the other part of it, which I write about very specifically, has to do with growing up as a gay kid in the 1970s when there was such rampant homophobia, when there was no person on television who was gay who didn't either kill somebody or get killed themselves, with only a couple of very minor exceptions, where gay people were subject of ridicule and where being known to be gay could really put you in real physical peril, where it certainly can today in many parts of the country and circumstances, and especially for certain very embattled groups, like especially trans kids of color. But back then, it was pretty much everybody, everywhere, all the time. So as a gay kid, you internalize this, mustn't share myself, must keep my guard up, mustn't give too much away. And especially in the company of a very macho jock who was on his way to the Navy SEALs, I wasn't going to let my guard down. And it was only over time when I realized how much I had misjudged Maxie, what a good person he was, what incredible values he had, how he wanted to be an even better person, how he wanted to learn and grow, that I started to. But old habits die hard. And it really was, it took me, we've been friends now 40 years, and it took me almost the full 40 years to finally be able to trust him and trust myself on a subconscious level. And the book is a chronicle of that. And one of the things that is most important to me in the book is Maxie was very vulnerable with me. Whenever Maxie was going through a tough time in his life, and I chronicle a lot of those in the book, he would come to me for advice. He would share his pain or his confusion. And I thought I was being a really good friend by always being there for him, but not ever sharing what I was going through. And what Maxie really taught me, and it is one of the lessons of this book, is the greatest gift that you can give a friend is allow that friend to help you. And eventually I learned that if I was vulnerable, if I allowed Maxie to help me, not only was he capable of helping me, but also that's what really solidified our friendship to a degree that had never been solidified before.
Oh, your answer is very understandable and I totally get that. Yeah, I'm finding that friendships, people want to help. They want to feel like they're part of your life, and you do that. I mean, you tell them part of their life, and they can, in the future, ask you about it, so they can show interest in that themselves.
Yeah, there's a thing I read, I wish I could credit it properly, but I read it online somewhere in the last week, which is, and it's a question particularly for men, but it's, if you were going through a tough time, how many people in your life, other men, would you be comfortable enough calling and telling them about it? And if the answer is nobody, then that's really, that's not a thing that is healthy. And I think, again, we've so messed up men in our society by this macho thing and making people feel that they can't and shouldn't share their difficulties. And I think we have to try to change that culture. And that's a little what I'm trying to do in this book too.
So again, we're getting ahead of my questions. What do you get out of your friendship with Chris, and what do you think Chris gets out of his friendship with you?
So we definitely taught each other a lot when we were kids, college students, and in the years afterwards. And his life interests me. He's an incredibly entertaining guy. He is sort of a life of the party person. He's a bit of a chaos factor, but when he's in the room, everything is kicked up a notch. So I have a lot of fun when I'm around Maxie, and he pushes me. He gets me to do physical activities I wouldn't otherwise do and go to places I wouldn't go. And I think one of the things that he gets about me, or gets from his friendship with me, is he's a really smart guy. and he does like to talk about books, and he does have marvelous ideas about education and about all sorts of things. And with me, he can sit around and talk about those things because I love to do that. And he can talk about books he's read and ideas. We both share our vulnerabilities with him. He had an operation for a brain tumor, and I was there for him. And I had a chronic illness, and I eventually shared that with him, and he's there for me on that, and really helps me with breathing exercises. He's a yoga fan and a meditation fan, and he helps me with all of that. But, and again, not to answer this question in too much length, one of the most beautiful things is now we're both 60. We also can just be in each other's presence and just enjoy being around an old friend. We don't actually have to be doing anything anymore or even saying anything anymore. It's just a pleasure to be around someone you've known for 40 years, have been through all sorts of things with, misunderstandings and all sorts of things, great experiences and tough experiences. And there's just a pleasure in that. So at the end of the day, I would say, having done all of this, just being in Maxie's presence gives me pleasure. And I think the same is true for him.
Well, yeah, he certainly pushes you in direction, like you write a bit towards the end about free diving.
Yeah.
Have you tried anything any more free diving?
I have not. And for anyone listening who doesn't know, free diving is essentially scuba diving without a tank. It's just doing something to hold your breath and trigger your mammalian diving reflex. And Maxie loves it. It's his nirvana, his cathedral, his church is to go under the water for minutes at a time. And he's always trying to get me to do it. And it's one of the comic scenes in the book is his attempts. And he's made me promise that I'll do it at some point, but I don't think anytime soon. So.
Well, yeah, he talks the word Querencia.
Oh, yes, Querencia. Yeah. That's his Querencia, exactly. It's a marvelous term that comes from Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, so I'm probably horribly mispronouncing it. But is the place you take refuge, the place you go to draw strength and comfort before heading back out. And Hemingway uses it to describe the place in a bull ring where the bull, maybe this is what it's described as anyways, I can't recall, where the bull goes before it makes its final stand against the matador. And so we talk about what is a querencia, and it's a big part of his school. Each kid has to go and find their own querencia, their physical place where they draw strength and comfort and can spend time alone. But I write about how for Maxie, it's the bottom of the ocean. It's when he's free diving is one of his querencias.
Have you found your querencia?
My querencia, which I came to realize, is very often a book. That when I am absorbed in a book, it's a kind of meditation for me, and it's where I gain my strength and solace. It's a refuge, but it also inspires me to go out. So I must say that in a broader sense, libraries are my querencia. That libraries are where I go to get strength, gain solace, regroup, and gain the strength and that I need to head out into the world and do what I need to do.
Oh, fist bump. Yeah, I get you. You've been in a relationship with your husband, David, for many years. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great, thanks. Yeah, we're coming on 40 years, which is crazy. And we're doing great. He's a remarkable person. It's very funny because he is, as people who read the book will know, a fashion designer. He loves books, but he doesn't happen to read mine. And that's just fine with me. So it's just as well. I read him the passages about him, and he either gave them thumbs up or thumbs down. But he's great.
And then Chris and Pam have quite a family. How are they doing?
They do. They have 4 fantastic kids. One of the jokes in the book that I thought was just purely funny, but some people seem quite outraged about, is they have 4 kids, and for many, many years, I couldn't for the life of me remember his kids' names. And he knew it. It was so obvious. I was always thinking like, how you kids doing? And he would say, you have no idea what their names are, do you? But he always thought that was funny. And because they were living in the Bahamas, where the school is, and I'm up here in New York, I didn't really meet his kids when they were little kids. So he later said, Will, why should you remember their names? You never met them. Don't worry about it. But now I know all 4 kids. They're amazing kids, and they're all thriving. They're just terrific young people.
Wonderful. Now, I just wanted to ask you, by chance, did you put together some pictures of the school?
Oh, I was going to do that, but I forgot. But it's called the Island School .org, I believe. If you
yeah, that's I confirmed. I can confirm that address.
Great. And there are marvelous pictures of the school on the website. So yes,
yeah, I did.
Visual things. I people always ask me for that, but also if anybody wants to follow me on Instagram at Will Schwalbe, I have on my Instagram feed pictures from the school and pictures of Maxie and me going way back to when we first met in college, right up to the present.
Wonderful. I'll have to take a look at that. Yeah, we just pretty much the end of it. Now, people in attendance, if you would like to put a Q&A, a question in the Q&A, go right ahead. Let's see. What can I ask? Got any more book ideas?
I do, but I see. I think there's a question that popped up.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Do things work out during misunderstandings? Sometimes during situations. So I hope I answered this question correctly, and if I've misunderstood it, please ask again or ask more. I think what we learned was that misunderstandings can fester, and that even the slightest misunderstanding over the course of our friendship sometimes resulted in us coming to completely incorrect conclusions. And our lack of communication and our inability to communicate the way we do now meant that we didn't nip those in the bud. So, for example, Maxie might come to town, and I'd hear he was in town, he didn't call me, and I would naturally say, well, you know, what kind of friend does that? Of course, he should have called me. But instead of just saying, you know, hey, Maxie, is there a problem? Is there something wrong with our friendship? I would just let it fester. So we've really learned that misunderstandings do arise, and one of the other gifts that you can give a friend is to let them know how you're feeling. So that I hope that answers that question.
So we got another question. I know you've written other books, especially like End of Your Life Book Club. Got one of the attendees is interested in hearing a little bit about each of them.
Great. So thank you for asking. And I should mention, in this book, I also mention a couple of the books that were very important to us and that frame the way I look at the world. But this is not a book-centered book. The previous two, The End of Your Life Book Club was a book about the books that I read with my mother when she was dying of pancreatic cancer. And books had always been one of our big topics of conversation. What are you reading? Was the question that we started pretty much every phone call with, and every time we got together. So that was a book about her life's work as a refugee advocate, as an educator. It was about how the family learned to live while she was dying and learned valuable lessons about that, but it was also about the way that books can give you something to share, put you on the same page, and give you a way of talking about things that are very difficult to talk about. For example, one of the books that we first talked about in our two-person unofficial book club while she was dying was Crossing to Safety by Wallace Stegner. where there is a character who's dying of cancer and her husband. And my mother and I were able to talk about the husband of this character as a way of talking about my father and how he would fare after her death. But by talking about the couple in the book, we were able to talk about this very difficult, painful thing without taking it head on. So that's one example. The next book I wrote was called Books for Living. And it's about the way the books in life intersect and the magical way that books find you when you need them most. And it's stories about books 20, I can't even remember how many, 22, I think, that found me when I really needed them, 26. And the story behind that and what I learned from those books, because I really believe that books are how we learn what we need to do in life. They're not just refuge. They're how we make meaning and how we learn about ourselves and other people, how we gain empathy, how we preserve our freedoms. So yeah, those are two books that I was able to convey my love of books and love of reading.
Great. Do you have any other ideas for books?
I do, but I see also there's another question that's popped up that I'd love to answer about engaging, what to do if friends are being bad influence and engaging in gossip or lying about others. I think again, the pact that Maxie and I made with each other, it took us a lifetime to realize that we needed to make this pact, is that we would share with one another, with each other, what we were feeling. And I said to him, you have to promise me that if you're mad at me or upset with the way I'm behaving, you will let me know. And I said to him, I will make you that same promise. And that is basically now my operating instruction with all my friends, is if someone is a friend and I can't tell them how their behavior is affecting me and have them receive it with an open heart, then I don't believe that person can really be my friend. I can be friendly with them, but that's not a friend. It's someone with whom I'm friendly. So that's my answer to that. I hope that's helpful. As far as new books, I'm really excited. I'm about to start work on something new, but I feel like I can never talk about it because if I talk, the energy goes into the conversation and not onto the page. So I hope I'll be able
I get that.
to come back, and I hope I'll be maybe even to come back in person when I've got that done and close to publish. So
yeah, I totally get that, because you have a certain amount of energy and you want to save it for the page.
That's exactly right.
As opposed to speaking it.
Yeah, I find it's like when you go on vacation and the first person says, how'd you like your vacation? And you tell them, and then you stop remembering your vacation, but you remember the story you told them about your vacation. And pretty soon that's all you remember. So when I want to write something, if I tell it to someone, I'm just remembering what I told them and I'm not capturing it, the real thing.
Yeah. Yeah. All the details that you would want to put on the page.
Exactly. Exactly.
But so, all right. Any other questions? Colin? And okay, let's make sure here. All right. Well, thank you very much, Will.
Great. I would really appreciate your.
Here's another one. Let's see here.
Oh, do friends need to talk to each other about boundaries? Yes. They do. And I think that's a great question, because that's part of that conversation. I think that when it's another gift, it's a gift we give each other when we tell each other our boundaries. It's a gift because it's very hard to guess, because we're all so different. One of the things I write about is Maxie loves to be surrounded by people day and night. He's surrounded by his kids, the students at the school, faculty, his neighbors. He's constantly got people. He doesn't need 1 minute of alone time. And I am really an introvert. I need many hours by myself in my room reading. And so I learned when I go to visit him to say, Maxie, love you, love your friends, love your family. At 3 o'clock, I'm going in the bedroom. I'll see you at 5:30 for a beer. but the next 2.5 hours, I'm out. And it's just helpful, because if I hadn't told him that, he'd be knocking on my door, come do this, come do that. So again, the more we can tell each other what our needs are and be honest and frank, the better friendships we can have. And I believe that with all my heart.
Yeah. Yeah. I find that to be effective in my relationships, to say this is enough.
Yeah.
especially as a fellow introvert. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, this has been a great conversation. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, and want to encourage everyone to, if you can pick up Will's book, you can give 27th Letter Books in Detroit a call. They'll be glad to send a book out to you. Free. They'll comp the shipping. It's a great book. So thank you very much, Will.
Oh, well, thank you. I love talking with you, and I really appreciate it. And I'm so grateful to the people listening in for all the great questions too. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Have
all right.
a good night.
Take care. Good night.